The 6th of January, the year 2025, was a very emotional day. Because on that day, several young Kenyans who had been missing for some time reappeared as if by magic. But what many Kenyans did not realize was that this development was very clear, conclusive evidence proving that there is a link between the government of William Samoei Ruto and this squad, these people who are abducting young Kenyans. The very eventful 6th of January 2025 gave us the link and gave us the proof. Let me explain. It is easy to see that this was a strategy, to neutralize the demonstrations against abductions, or at least slow them down. And I believe that objective was achieved. And of course, who does that benefit? It benefits the limping, struggling Ruto regime. Bottom line, there is now no debate. There should be no debate or argument as to who is behind these abductions. And remember, this is not the first piece of evidence to link these abductions directly to State House. It is not. And we urgently need to answer the question, why? What are these abductions all about? What is objective? How do these abductions help the Ruto regime? We need to answer that question, which we will in a minute. But first of all, while still staying at the strategy of the government vis-a-vis in relation to these abductions, there was something else very fascinating that maybe many of us did not take note of. Now, Ruto sycophants and those close to this regime have very carelessly told us at one point that the people behind these abductions, and they've named them, they have claimed that the people behind these abductions are Kindiki Gachagua, the former deputy president, immediate former deputy president, and the Trans Nzoia governor, George Natembeya. I'm sure many of us caught that piece of news. And that is why I sat up and paid attention when one of the young men who had been abducted, who was released, Billy Mwangi, who went missing for 15 days from Embu. You remember even his father was in court, breaking down in tears. Billy Mwangi was released in, wait for this one, in Nyeri. And of course, Nyeri is where Gachagua hails from. Now, Billy Mwangi was of course able to make his way to Embu, where his parents received him. And they were overjoyed, they couldn't believe it. Another victim, Bernard Kavuli, who hails from Gong Town, was found in Kitale. Kitale is the capital of Trans Nzoia County. Trans Nzoia County, whose governor is George Natembeya. And yet another victim was released in Luanda, which is in Vihiga County. Now, if you know Western Kenya well, Vihiga is not that far from Kitale. All these counties, Vihiga, Kakamega, Trans Nzoia, are fairly close to each other. And so it is not too difficult to see the counter-narrative that is being created here. Now, please be patient. I know this is a very emotive issue, and people may be wondering, what is Kumekucha talking about? We don't want to hear that. We want to hear about how these people are suffering. We want to hear about how some of the victims were released looking very healthy. Tulizeni boli, please. Let's take this step by step. so that we have a full grasp of what is happening here, and also so that we discover some mind-blowing, mind-boggling facts associated with these abductions, which you will not believe. Okay? In my humble opinion, on this issue of abductions, it is important that we identify early some of the counter-narratives we will be facing very shortly, and which of course some people will be very determined to shove down our throats and to force us to believe. Okay? Of course some of us will believe them. Very, very sad, but true. It's life. And so, my friends, that is one of the counter-narratives we should expect going forward. But there is another one, even more heartbreaking, and in my opinion disgusting. Yeah? How people would have the nerve to try and fool Kenyans in this way. And this is the attempt, yeah, to blame some foreigners. The DCI is telling us that there's somebody who has escaped from India who is notorious, very notorious, for getting involved in crimes to do with body organ harvesting. Yeah, something which is, I don't know what to say. And if you follow the developments, even what the government pathologist recently said, you can see where this counter-narrative is going to emerge from. Okay? That should be clear. But of course we must also acknowledge that in all this, there is the good news. And what is the good news? It would seem that this abduction unit is being shut down. How do I know? Because the counter-narrative being prepared, yeah, like there's a foreigner involved, there is a suspect who has sneaked into the country. All that suggests that this is an exit strategy for the abduction unit. That is the good news. However, there is another fear in the horizon. What is going to replace this abduction unit? That should be of real concern. Anyway, that is the clear indication here. Yeah, based on the counter-narratives we see, people are very busy constructing. And we are supposed to believe that some foreign criminals are on the side of government and they're doing their things in such a way as to assist the government of William Samoei Ruto. For instance, by releasing the victims when protests against these abductions are starting to pick up. Yeah, and therefore these foreign criminals are releasing some victims so as to neutralize, to cool down, to take away the momentum, yeah, from these protests on behalf of the Ruto regime, which is laughable. Of course it is. It's ridiculous. Now, let me just very quickly address another concern that most Kenyans seem to have, because we have people who have been abducted, who have been released. Excellent news. So what Kenyans are expecting next is that these victims should come out and tell us in great detail what happened to them. Give us more evidence. Yeah? Give us more information on this abduction unit. Expose them. Yeah? They should just talk freely. Tell us everything. Hey. It is amazing how the human race and how we Kenyans have completely lost it. We don't have an iota of empathy. We don't want to put ourselves in the shoes of another person. You imagine, you have gone through this trauma, this very harrowing experience. What state of mind are you going to have after you've been released. And don't forget, and I am very certain of this, that before they were released, they must have been threatened and given instructions. Like, don't dare talk about this thing. If you talk about this thing, you know what is going to happen. We're going to come back for you. Yeah, and what you experienced will be nothing compared to what you'll experience when we nab you for the second time. Okay? Please take note of that. Indeed, we have evidence of this, because we have had victims in the past, I believe sometime last year, who came out and confessed that they will not talk about what happened to them because they were told in no uncertain terms to keep their mouths shut. Regulars of this channel will of course know that I've been through a very similar experience during the Moi days. And I remember after I had been released, I was not able to talk about my ordeal for months. I'm not kidding. And even when I finally started talking about it, there's some things which I didn't talk about. Indeed, there are some things which I only spoke about for the very first time on this Kumekucha channel. Oh yes, I know many of us don't fully appreciate what kind of trauma we're talking about here. But people are different. Yeah, people handle these situations very differently. Take for instance, one of the recent victims, in fact a very famous one, yeah, the cartoonist, Kibet Bull, very brave young man. In fact, in my opinion, they did not manage to break this one, although admittedly, he was also very lucky. He was only held for 15 days. And also in his case, there was a lot of pressure, yeah, from the public that immediately emerged soon after he had been taken. And therefore, I am certain that those who abducted him were careful with him, yeah, because they were not sure what was going to happen next. And also I'm sure the community he hails from helped a lot. Those giving orders were scared for political reasons. I'm sure you know what I mean. I am sure they did not want to unnecessarily provoke the community of the president. Although in my opinion, they still messed up big time, taking this man in the first place. You see, unknowingly or not, they have managed to unite all Kenyans, including the Kalenjin community, against this government. Yeah, because everybody has been abducted. Even as everybody, all communities continue to suffer under the ridiculous policies of the Ruto regime, a government that clearly does not know what they're doing. Anyway, I have a feeling that this regime has created yet another monster that it will live to regret creating. But while we're still there with Kibet Bull, there is an interesting piece of information here that tells us something very shocking about this abduction unit that probably many Kenyans do not know. At least I did not know it before I came across this crazy information. Now, Kibet was abducted after coming from the office of a man we know very well, Senator Okiya Omtata. And what Senator Okiya Omtata did after this young man visited his office was to instruct his driver to give him a lift to where he was going to board a matatu home. Now, after he alighted from Okiya Omtata's vehicle and boarded a matatu, shortly after that, a young attractive lady boarded the same matatu and sat very close to Kibet Bull and started taking selfies, some of which included Kibet Bull somewhere in the background. And it was shortly after this that Bwana Kibet Bull was taken. Now, this would seem to suggest, think about it. Why would somebody want to take selfies with a photograph of a person of interest? Because I'm certain it was not a coincidence. Why would somebody want to take such selfies? You know, there is a sophisticated software that does facial recognition. I believe that these selfies were for the purpose of facial recognition to confirm the identity of this man who was about to be taken, and who was indeed taken shortly after those selfies with this strange, attractive lady. Now, that tells us a lot. It is clear that this abduction people, this abduction unit, is much more sophisticated than most Kenyans realize. Let's even go back to the basics. Contrary to what many people may think, it is not easy to track people. It isn't. Especially when you don't know what they look like. Especially when it may not be very easy to recognize them out there in the streets. Trust me, you would need a very sophisticated setup. And all this takes a lot of money and a lot of personnel, which of course means that this abduction unit is very well financed. And so, where does the financing come from? Does it come from taxpayers' money? I think it does. And that's a whole other topic by itself, of how this government is messing us up. In a nutshell, using your taxes to abduct you. Anyway, for those of us who thought that this was just some ragtag team, quickly put together, dealing with situations and challenges as they arise, those who had that thinking, including yours truly, we now need to go back to the drawing board and think again. And don't forget all the other bits and pieces of information we already have about this abduction unit. It is headed by a former military man, former KDF. There are foreigners involved in this team, etc., etc. This is not a small operation. It is a major operation. But now, we need to come back to that haunting question that I asked at the beginning. Why? Okay. We know that former dictator of Uganda, Idi Amin Dada, had his deadly, infamous abduction units. We know that the evil apartheid government in South Africa also had their dreaded abduction teams. What was the whole objective? It was to create fear. It was to subdue, oppress any opposition to the governments involved in those situations. And therefore, in the case of the very same units in the country called Kenya, the aim is to create fear and to subdue anybody who might want to oppose the regime of William Samoei Ruto. And this is very interesting because we are supposed to be living in a democracy, in a country where free speech is supposed to be guaranteed. Indeed, it is entrenched in our constitution. And so, what is happening here? Well, it seems that the people in power have a different view, contrary to our constitution, contrary to the expectations of Kenyans. However, the good news is that this fear, is it working? No, it does not seem to be working. In fact, it seems to have backfired very, very, very badly on those promoting it and on this regime. And what is now unfolding is payday for this very terrible mistake of the Ruto regime. Oh yes, because Kenyans have clearly said no to these abductions. Kenyans are demonstrating and protesting against them. Kenyans are taking many, many actions against this thing which was invented, or rather created, by this regime to spread fear, to intimidate, and to discourage Kenyans. Any Kenyans who may want to rise up against this government and say no. Clearly, that was the plan. And now we know that many things had been planned, assuming even that the Gen Z protests never happened. This government seems to have been planning many things that they suspected some Kenyans would oppose, like extension of the presidential term, for instance, from 5 years to 7 years, the way it is in neighboring Rwanda, so that a president can serve for 14 years. And who knows what will happen in those 14 years? Somebody else will come with yet another bill, if the people don't protest. And a president could stay in power for a very long time. And therefore, this unit was key in that plan right from the beginning, to ensure that there would be so much fear amongst Kenyans, that Kenyans would be subdued, that the evil plans of this regime would have gone ahead with very little, if any, opposition. But clearly, that has not worked. Clearly, that will not work. Now, in the next few hours, I'm releasing weekly intelligence briefings number 122. And so those who are subscribers, please look out for it. And then also in the next 24 hours, I'm going to release a highly sensitive special report that digs very deep into this abduction unit. And of course, in that special report, I talk about a lot of highly sensitive things. I name names, and therefore I cannot carry that on this public channel. I believe you can see details on your screens right now if you're interested in that special report. Unfortunately, because of the highly sensitive nature of this special report, it will be released to only 25 of us. And so I urge you to book your copy now, as soon as possible. It is strictly first come, first served. It is only Kenya shillings 3,999. You can see the full details on your screens right now. Please act immediately and then wait. It will be out in the next 24 hours in your inbox. Pop! And so make sure after you've made your payment, that you text me your email address, or you send me an email so that I know where to send it. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.